back to At the Glass. I'm your host, Mark. On today's edition of At the Glass, I'm going to do a little preview of the upcoming Big 12 conference, kind of like what I did for Conference USA on my previous recording. I'm going to do a rundown of the Big 12 conference. So I will do a little brief overview and just give a prediction what may come of each team, and let's dive right in. So, as you know, Big 12 is now 16 teams. Last season, OU and Texas finished up being in the Big 12, and now they're in the SEC. We have new schools joining this year. We have Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah that are now part of the Big 12 conference, as they have left the Pac-12, which is no longer, still existence because Oregon State and Washington State have the rights to that conference, but all the other schools have left to either go to the Big 10 or the ACC that didn't come to the Big 12. So with that, it is 16 teams now in the Big 12. They are not doing any divisions or east or west. It's just everyone has their schedule, and then who has the best conference record at the end of the season will play each other in the Big 12 championship game and battle out for a playoff berth in the new expanded playoff for college football. So with that being said, here we go. We'll start off with Arizona. Arizona went 10-3 last year overall, 7-2 in conference play in the Pac-12. They won the Alamo Bowl against OU. Their head coach, Brent Brennan, has taken over the spot for Arizona. He comes over from San Jose State, where he was the head coach there from 2017 through last year, 2023. He had a 34-48 record over there at San Jose State. Brent is replacing Jedd Fisch, who has left to go be the University of Washington's head coach. Brent has brought on Dino Babers. Dino Babers. He was, like I said, he's going to be the offensive coordinator. He was previously the head coach for Syracuse from 2016 to 2023 before he was dismissed. And then as for defense coordinator, Dwayne Akana, he was an analyst with Arizona last year during the season, but prior to that, he was the defensive backs coach at Stanford and at Texas for a long time. So he has a very extensive knowledge of defense and has been around the game for quite some time. So that's your coaching staff for head coach and OCDC. As far as just offense in general, Noah Fifita will be the QB starting off the season. He threw for 2,869 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Running back Ja'Cory Krosky is transferring in from New Mexico, where he rushed for 1,190 yards and 17 touchdowns. And Quali Conley transferring in from San Jose State, who rushed for 842 yards, 9 touchdowns. He also had 25 receptions for 264 yards. And Kidrick Rescano is transferring in from Ole Miss. So that's going to be your backfield there for Arizona. It should be pretty solid one. And then for the receiver-wise, you have Tetriara McMillan, who had 90 receptions for 1,402 yards, 10 touchdowns. And Remilo Murphy, who's transferring in from Old Dominion, and he had 28 receptions for 502 yards and 3 touchdowns there. So a little thin on the wide receiver prospects-wise, but they do have a veteran to go with his QB from the previous season, so which will be helpful. And then they have their tight end, Sam Olson, coming back with 22 receptions, 310 yards, and 3 touchdown passes that he caught for touchdowns as for tight end. As for defense, all 4 starters are gone up front from the previous season. Pass rusher, Trey Smith, followed Brent Brennan from San Jose State, which will bulk will help bulk up the line. And then they have Mr. Chubba May, who's massive at 347 pound, transferring in from UC Davis. Then also transferring in is Kevon Darton from Syracuse. So that will definitely help the front line that was depleted after the front 4 veterans are gone from the previous season. Jacob Manu, who had finished season with 116 tackles with 6.5 sacks for the Wildcats last year, and Justin Flo will help contribute at the linebacker spot. And cornerback Takahiro Davis breaking up 15 passes. Safety Dalton Johnson, Gunnar Maldonado combined for 167 tackles, and Traydon Stooks made 55 stops with 9 broken up passes. So secondary is looking pretty strong for the Wildcats. For their schedule-wise, they will lead off with being at home against New Mexico, and then they play NAU, which I believe is Northern Arizona University, and then hit the road against Kansas State, at Utah, home for Texas Tech, at BYU, home for Colorado, West Virginia, at UCF, home for U of H, at TCU, and then they finish at home with Arizona State. And they're projected at an even 8 wins. I say my projection is they finish with 7 wins with the new head coach. They'll still be competitive, compete, but just new coach there, just new offense, various things. Just so that's where there will be for Arizona University. Next, we're going to move on to Arizona State, who went 3-9 overall with a 2-7 conference record in the Pac-12. Like I said, as mentioned earlier, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah, they're newcomers. So, like I said, this will be their first season in the Big 12. So with Arizona State going 2-7 in the Pac-12 to finish up their last year there, they're coming in with head coach Kenny Dillingham in his second season, offensive coordinator Marcus Arroyo, his first season. He was previously the head coach at UNLV from 2020 through 2022. He replaced Marcos is replacing Bo Baldwin, who was not retained following the 23 season. Defensive coordinator Brian Ward is back for a second season as a defense coordinator. As for the offensive side of the game, quarterback Jaden Rashada is transferring it, or their star quarterback Jaden Rashada transferred to Georgia. Sam Levitt transferring in from Michigan State. He'll be the starter. He had very little playing time last year at Michigan State, but Jeff Sims will also be in the mix at QB as well for the Sun Devils. Going to running back, Cam Skadbu. I apologize, but Skadbu. He rushed for 783 yards, 9 touchdowns, 24 receptions for 286 yards and 1 touchdown. DeCarlos Brooks, who had 259 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. It'll be filling out the backfield there. As far as the wide receiver tight end spot, Elijah Badger, their top receiver, he left for Florida, and tight end Jalen Conyers is off to Texas Tech. May have under the radar wide receivers that could step up, those being Troy Amiri, who had 3 touchdown receptions, and McQuellen Stovall back as well. So we'll see how the receiver core steps up for the Sun Devils. As far as their defense, Tate Romney and Caleb McCulley tied for 4th on the team with 52 tackles. Transferring in, they have Keyshawn Elliott from New Mexico State and Zerus Fasalu from San Diego State. And Samari Simmons is going to be a solid safety, and he's getting help with transfers from Javon Robinson from Washington State and LaTerrence Welch from LSU transferring in as well to help with the secondary. As far as their schedule, the Sun Devils are opening up at home with Wyoming, Mississippi State, on the road at Texas State, Texas on the road against Tech, home for Kansas, Utah, road at Cincy, at Oklahoma State, home for UCF, at Kansas State, home for BYU, and they finish on the road at their rival Arizona. And they are projected with over and under 4.5. It depends, I think, how they play overall. They definitely will not be bowl eligible. They could potentially come in winning 4 games, 5 at best for the Sun Devils. Next, we'll move on to BYU. They went 5-7 overall last year, 2-7 in conference play because their first season in the Big 12 was last year, and so this is going to be the second season in the Big 12. So they have head coach Kalani Sitake. He's going into his ninth season as a head coach. Offense coordinator Aaron Roderick will be his 4th season, and defense coordinator Jay Hill will be his 2nd season. As for the offensive side of things, quarterback Jake Retzloff, who threw for 648 yards, 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions while rushing for 3 touchdowns, will be competing with Gary Buchanan, transferring in from South Florida, where he threw for 1,070 yards, 6 touchdowns and 6 interceptions while rushing for 386 yards and 3 touchdowns in the 2022 season. Some of you might be like, that name sounds familiar. If you were a Baylor fan or followed Baylor or went to there, he was at Baylor prior to South Florida. I think he was hurt last year because I didn't find any 23 stats on him. So I think he either just sat out last year and then transferred, or he might have been hurt because I know he got hurt in the 22 season. That's why his stats were very limited. But the guy can play. He's a very talented QB. So him and Jake will be in the mix for the QB spot. As far as a running back, LJ Marting will lead the way with this season. He had 518 rushing yards with 4 touchdowns last year. And for the wide receivers, Chase Roberts was back and he had 573 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. Cody Epps, who had 259 receiving yards, and Darius Lestier with 365 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. Rounds out your wide receivers and tight ends. As for his defense, not much to really report there other than Ben Bywaters returning from a shoulder injury, which kept him out. He's a key factor. Jake Kelly transferring in from Weber State. Safety Micah Harper and Taylon Alfrey will be back after missing most of last season due to injury as well. So some other key defensive guys that missed last year that hurt the defense will be back. So the defense should be a little bit stronger this upcoming season. As far as their schedule, BYU will open with Southern Illinois, at SMU, at Wyoming, home against Kansas State, at Baylor, home for Arizona, Oklahoma State, at UCF, at Utah, home for Kansas, at Arizona State, and then finish at home with U of H. Their over-under is 4.5. I think they hit the over with 5 wins. No, take it back. The over-under is 4.5. I still say they finish over with at least 5 wins on the season for BYU. All right. Next, I'm going to touch base on is Baylor. I'm diving a little deeper on Baylor as my lovely wife went to school there, and my father-in-law and sister-in-law did, and then as a lot of my wife's side of the family went to Baylor, and they supports them very much and want them to do well, as most people do with any of their alma maters. So as for, like I said, Baylor, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper versus the other schools that are in the Big 12. So as for Baylor, not a very good last year. They went 3-9 overall, 2-7 in the Big 12. Head coach Dave Aranda is back for his 5th season. They do have a new offensive coordinator, Jake Spavital, coming in as for his first season. Offense coordinator at Baylor. He was previously the OC at Cal for last season, and prior to that, he was Texas State's head coach from 2019 through 2022. And then he was also Texas A&M's OC when Johnny Manziel, or the man himself who claims he invented Johnny Football, or football was named after him, however you want to go with that. But yes, and then he was also West Virginia's offense coordinator after he was left from A&M. For defense coordinator, Matt Pollage is back for the 2nd season. However, I believe Dave is going to do a lot of the play calling for defense plays. Far as the offense this upcoming season for the Bears, QB Blake Shapen transferred out to Mississippi State. Sawyer Robertson, who filled in last season as backup for Blake when he was hurt, or is back in the mix, but they got a transfer in from Toledo. That is Daquan Finn, who was announced as the starter. Daquan, he threw for 2,657 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, while rushing for 563 yards, 7 touchdowns last year for Toledo. Very dual threat, dynamic quarterback. Should be fun to watch back there for the Bears, especially with Jake Spavital's style of offensive play calling. So we'll see how that pans out for him. As far as running back wise, Dominic Richardson, he rushed for 519 yards, 1 touchdown. Richard Reese rushed for 306 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Dawson Pendergrass rushed for 338 yards and 5 touchdowns. And that's going to be your backfield for the Bears. So we'll see if they pick up the production from there, get some more running out of them, and just get more involved in the offensive scheme of things. As far as wide receivers and tight end spot, the leading target, Monterey Baldwin, is back in the slot after making 38 catches for 623 yards and 4 touchdowns, while averaging over 16 yards per catch. Keytron Jackson is a good deep threat who had 28 catches for 489 yards and 1 touchdown. He averaged over 17 yards per grab. As far as the tight ends wise for the Bears, Drake Dabney, who led the way at tight end last season with 552 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns, transferred to their rival TCU. So he's a Horned Frog now. Kelsey Johnson and Michael Trigg, who transferred in from Ole Miss, will look to step in to fill that void at tight end between those two. So, and then as far as the O-line wise, they were the worst in the Big 12 last year, hands down. If you watch any of the game, it was painful to watch that O-line. They were last in sacks and tackles for loss allowed. The running game averaged just 115 yards per outing, and it struggled to do much of anything right overall. The returning experience should matter, though, for the Bears on O-line. So hopefully they get a much better production out of the O-line. 4 decent starters are back from a young group that did struggle last year, and coming in are Kurt Deniker from Ohio, and for one of the guard spots, and Omar Agibadion from Montana State to push for time in the interior rotation as well. As for the defense side of things for the Bears, if you thought the offense was bad for the Bears, the defense was worse. Bears were dead last in scoring defense, allowing 33 points per game and 12th out of the 14 in total D. The front 3 should be okay with veteran tackles Cooper Lands and Trayvon May returning, and Trey Wilson and a JUCO transfer Tonga Lolahi for the line there. As far as linebacker wise, the core should be a solid in a strength. Matt Jones, who led the team in tackles, is back along. Matt Jones, who led the team in tackles, is back along with Brooks Miller. The Bears will need more of a pass rush this upcoming season and production out of their jack position. Garmin Randolph and Texas Tech transfer Steve Linton will look to give a boost at that spot. The lack of sacks and getting pressure on the QP hurts production in the secondary. Corners are experienced group with Caden Jenkins leading the way, along with Chateau Reed and Tevin Williams. Safeties can hit. They are missiles. They want to make the big play. So, look, that should be fun to watch them to fly around back there. Devin Bobby was second in the team with 76 tackles. Devin Lamar was third with 41 stops, and Kedrick Simpkins is coming in from Western Kentucky after making 50 tackles and 6.5 sacks and 10 tackles for a loss when he was at Western Kentucky. So, some good pickups for the Bears during this offseason to help fill some of the holes. Obviously, you're going to look to bounce back. As I did for my Bearcats when I did the Conference USA breakdown, I have some not so fun 2023 stats for the Bears as well. Touchdowns scored. Opponents was 52 to the Bears 32. In the second quarter scoring, opponents had 141 points to Baylor 78. In sacks, opponents had 34 for 250 yards, while the Bears only had 18 sacks for 110 yards. As far as their schedule, this upcoming season, the Bears open up with Tarleton State, go on the road for Utah, which is a non-conference game. This was scheduled prior to Utah coming into the Big 12, so it is a non-conference game against Utah. So keep that in mind. So it will not play into if there's a tie between Utah and Baylor, and if Baylor wins and they say, well, we beat Utah, it like I said, it's not a conference game, so it won't hold any meaning when it comes to tiebreakers that way. So anyway, they're at Utah, home for Air Force, at Colorado, home for BYU, at Iowa State, at Texas Tech, home for Oklahoma State, home for TCU, at West Virginia, at U of H, and finish at home with Kansas. Their projected over-under is 5.5. I do think they will become at least 6 to be bowl eligible. As stated before, the O-line will need to protect and be a key factor in the Baylor success on offense. As for Dave Aranda, I know a lot of reports have him in as a top 5, in the top 5 of coaches on the hot seat, that he might be one of the first ones to be dismissed during the season. So I know he's going to do what he can to right the ship and keep things moving in the right directions after winning the Big 12 3 years ago. And so I know he's going to try to do what he can to get Bears back on track and in the right direction. That way he will not be dismissed. So that is your overview of the Baylor Bears for the upcoming 24 season. Wish them the best, and let's hope for them to be in the Big 12 championship game if possible. So from there, we're going to move on to Cincinnati, who went 3-9 last season overall, 1-8 in conference play in their first season in the Big 12. Head coach Scott Satterfield is back for a second season. Offensive coordinator Brad Glenn. And then you have defense coordinator Tyson Vidette. His first season was Iowa State assistant head coach and linebacker coach from 2016 to 2023. And then co-defense coordinator Nate Fuqua is back for a second season as well. On the offense side of things, QB Emory Jones graduated to the NFL. So Brendan Swarsby transferring in from Indiana, where he passed for 1,587 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions in 2023, will lead the way at the QB spot. Running back Corey Kiner ran for 1,047 yards, 5 touchdowns, is back. Miles Montgomery transferred to UCF, and Evan Pryor transferring in from Ohio State will help fill the void for Miles Montgomery transferring out to Central Florida. As far as wide receiver tight end group, Xavier Henderson is back, who had 58 catches for 782 yards, 3 touchdowns, and transferring in is Tony Johnson from Florida Atlantic, and Tyron Smith from UTEP will help in the wide receiver spot. As for defense side of things, the D-line gets help with Darian Verner transferring in from Wisconsin, and Mike Coleman from Eastern Michigan. Dante Corleone is a big factor, but is dealing with health issues. No timetable on his return. Jalen Hunt will help as well on the D-line. As far as linebackers, they have veterans back, Jack Dingle and Jonathan Thompson. Jared Bartlett transferring in from West Virginia will help there at the linebacker group, and secondary will have several players starting that transferred in from several schools as they were depleted there. As for the schedule, for Cincinnati, they open up with Towson at home, Pittsburgh at home, on the road at Miami, Ohio, home for U of H, at Texas Tech, at Central Florida, at Arizona State, at Colorado. Home for Arizona State, at Colorado, home for West Virginia, at Iowa State, at Kansas State, and finish at home against TCU. Their over-under win projection is 5.5. Cincinnati will probably finish with 5 wins on the season, if I had to take a guess. So that is your overlook on the Cincinnati Bearcats there. Moving on from the Cincinnati, we're going to move to the University of Colorado, who went 4-8 last year, 1-8 in the Pac-12. They're being led by primetime Mr. Deion Sanders, who is there as for a second season for the Buffaloes. He has offense coordinator Pat Schumer there for a second season as OC, and defense coordinator Robert Livingston is in for his first season as defense coordinator there for Colorado. He takes over as Charles Kelly is the DC at Auburn now. Robert was the safety defensive back coach for the Cincinnati Bengals from 2016 to 2023. So for offense, obviously they have their star quarterback Schroeder Sanders, who threw for 3,230 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. For running back, leading rusher for the team last season, Dylan Edwards, transferred to K-State, and Anthony Hankerson transferred to Oregon State. Dolan Hayden transferred in from Ohio State, will more likely get the nod to be the starting running back. For the wide receivers and tight ends, Travis Hunter will play both ways. Those who don't know Travis Hunter, he plays both sides of the ball. Very, very talented, freak athlete. Going to be more likely a top 10 pick in this upcoming NFL draft. So he'll be a fun one to keep an eye on at the wide receiver spot. And weapon, Jimmy Horn is back, and Will Shepard transferring in from Vandy. Sam Hart transferring in from Ohio State will take over at the tight end spot. For defense side of things, they were the 4th worst in college football. They need to be better on the pass rush. Deion Hayes, Samuel Okunlola, and Houston transfer Chidizi Nakwano will hopefully provide the pass rush. Levanta Bentley and Trevor Woods are back. Like I said, Travis Hunter, who I just mentioned for wide receiver, will be a lockdown corner. And then you have Shiloh Sanders, who led the team in tackles from his safety spot, is back. And Oklahoma State transfer Samuel Okuluna will get the chance to make plays with everyone avoiding Hunter on the other side of the field at the cornerback position. And then they have a Liberty transfer. Preston Hodge will be helping out as well for the secondary. As far as their schedule for the season, the Buffaloes will open up with North Dakota State. And then they go on the road to Nebraska, at Colorado State, home for Baylor, at Central Florida, home for Kansas State, at Arizona, home from Cincinnati, at Texas Tech, home for Utah, at Kansas, and finish at home against Oklahoma State. Their projection over under for those wins is 5.5. Being their second season, getting acclimated with Dion being the head coach and getting things worked out, I feel like they'll at least finish with 6 wins on the season and be bowl eligible for Dion's second season, leading the way for the Buffaloes. From there, we're going to move on to University of Houston, U of H. Like I said, they were in the Big 12 last season for the first season, so this will be the second season. So the Cougars went 4-8 overall, 2-7 in conference. Mr. Willie Fritz, as I mentioned in the Conference USA recording, he was former Sam Houston head coach there before he left to go take the head coaching position at Georgia Southern, and then went to Tulane from there and did very, very well at Tulane, where they won the Cotton Bowl 2 years ago. Had a very successful season last year as well. For what he can do at Tulane was unbelievable, and the dude knows how to win and prepare teams and get them moving in the right direction. So nonetheless, great hire by U of H to get Willie Fritz there as their head coach. So Willie is replacing Dana Holgerson, who was dismissed after last season. So, like I said, Willie's taking the lead now. He is bringing in offense coordinator Kevin Barbay, for his first season as OC at U of H. Was offense coordinator at Mississippi State last year for the 23 season. And Sheil Wood is in his first season as well for defense coordinator. But he was a defense coordinator at Tulane last season with Fritz, so they have worked together previously. So that will be beneficial. So far as the offense side of things, QB Donovan Smith is back. He threw for 2,800 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions, while rushing for 428 yards and 6 touchdowns. Running back Parker Jenkins and Stacy Snead both are back. They combined for 746 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns last season. As far as wide receivers, leading receiver Samuel Brown transferred to Miami, and Matthew Golden transferred to Texas. Joseph Manjack, who had 577 receiving yards for 6 touchdowns, and Stephon Johnson with 277 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns will be key players to lean on at wide receivers. And Malik Carr, transferring in from Michigan State, will help out at the tight end spot. As far as defense side of things, they picked up 13 transfers, which is a lot. I'm guessing with dismissal of Dana and just players wanting to move on and do their thing. So they said they picked up 13 transfers. Linebacker Jamal Morris, who was third in leading tackler last year, is back. Transfers for the 2 other spots, Michael Batten from Louisiana Monroe and Corey Plott from Tulane. And Condre Gant from Louisiana will help fill in the gaps. They'll have 6 new defensive backs. Will fill around A.J. Holsey, who led the team with 98 stops. Transfers and are solid with Brian Massey from SMU and Hershey McLaren from West Virginia. As far as U of H's upcoming schedule, the Cougars will open up against UNLV, hit the road against OU, home for Rice, at Cincy, home for Iowa State, at TCU, at Kansas, home for Utah, Kansas State, at Arizona, home for Baylor, and finish on the road at BYU. As far as first year, Willie Fritz, the over-under for them is 5.5. I say they'll at least get 4 wins. They, at best, maybe 5. I mean, wish them more. All the best. If they get more than that and become bowl eligible, that'd be awesome. That'd be great. But I feel like that is going to be a stretch. With that, I'd say they finish with 4 to 5 wins on the season. So from there, we're going to move on to Iowa State Cyclones. 7-6 overall last year, 6-3 in conference play. They lost to Memphis in the Liberty Bowl. As for the head coach, Matt Campbell is returning for his 9th season. Offensive coordinator Taylor Mauser is taking over for his first season, as he has been on staff since 2016. Taylor replaces Nathan Schilhaus, who went to Los Angeles Rams to be an assistant coach there, and defense coordinator John Heacock will be leading the defense play calling. As far as offense, Rocco Beck is back. He performed great last year with 3,120 passing yards with 23 touchdowns, 8 interceptions with 3 rushing touchdowns. Running back Abu Sama rushed for 614 yards, 6 touchdowns, is back. Eli Sanders and Curtavious Norton both transferred out for the Cyclones. As far as wide receiver, all Big 12, Jaden Higgins is returning, who had 983 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns, along with Jalen Knoll, who had 66 receptions for 820 yards, 7 touchdowns, while will lead the way for all 4 of the wide receivers returning. As far as defense aside, they were the second best in defense in the Big 12 behind Texas, who's no longer in the Big 12. Defensive line is going to be strong with all the 4 starters they have. Linebacker will be strong. Caleb Bacon and Jack Sadowski are back to lead the way. Carson Willick will help fill in. As far as secondary, very experienced. Miles Purchase is returning. Jeremiah Cooper led the team with 5 interceptions. Bo Freeler led the team with 107 stops and 3 interceptions, and Malik Vernon with 2 interceptions, 47 tackles, as well as will be back for the secondary. So very experienced back secondary. It'll be fun, very tough to pass on for opposing teams as far as their schedule. For the Cyclones, they open with North Dakota at home, hit the road at Iowa, home for Arkansas State, at U of H, home for Baylor, at West Virginia, home for Central Florida, home for Texas Tech, at Kansas, home for Cincinnati, at Utah, and finish up with K-State at home. They are projected to have a over-under of 7.5. I will bet that they hit the over with 8 wins. They could maybe go with a solid 9 for the Cyclones. Matt Campbell always does a phenomenal job getting the Cyclones ready, and no matter what adversity they face with injuries or whatever it may be, he always has them prepared and ready to go. With that, we're going to go to Kansas, who went 9-4 last year, 5-4 in conference play. They won the Guaranteed Rate Bowl against UNLV. Head coach Lance Leipold is back for his 4th season. Offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes is coming in for his first season there for the Jayhawks. He was Baylor's previously offensive coordinator from 21 through the 23 season. Jeff is replacing Andy Kornacki, who is off to Penn State to be their offensive coordinator. Co-offensive coordinator Jim Zembrowski is back for his 2nd season, and defense coordinator Brian Borland for his 4th season, and co-defense coordinator DK McDonald is in for his 1st season. Was with the Philadelphia Eagles as a defensive back coach prior to coming to Kansas to be a co-defense coordinator. As far as the offensive side of things, quarterback Jalen Daniels is back after being hurt most of last year. In the limited games or played, he had 705 passing yards for 5 touchdowns and 1 interceptions in 3 games. Running back Devin Neal is back, who rushed for 1,280 yards, 16 touchdowns, 217 receiving yards, 1 touchdown, and Daniel Hischoff, who had 626 rushing touchdowns and 626 yards rushing for 8 touchdowns. As far as wide receivers, their top 3 wide receivers are back. Leading the way, Lawrence Arnold, who had 782 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. Quentin Skinner, who had 587 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. And Luke Grime, who had 555 receiving yards for 6 touchdowns. So a solid wide receiver core for the Jayhawks to help Jalen out for target-wise. As for the defense side of things for the Jayhawks, Jeremy Robbins will be a factor on the D-line. Joby transferred in from Michigan State will help. T1 Berryhill will be a key player at linebacker, and great cornerback Kobe Bryant, along with Mello Dotson. Marvin Grant and O.J. Burrows combined for 103 tackles, so solid returners as well in the backfield there, or secondary for the Jayhawks. For their upcoming schedule, the Jayhawks have Linderwood open with at home. Then they go to Illinois, home for UNLV, at West Virginia, home for TCU, at Arizona State, home for against U of H, at K-State, home for Iowa State, at BYU, home for Colorado, and finish on the road at Baylor. For that, the over-under for the Jayhawks this year is 7.5 wins. If they play well and going with quarterback Jalen Daniels stays healthy, they could potentially, I feel like they'll hit the over and get 7 wins on the season. So with that, we're going to move to Kansas State Wildcats, who went 9-4 last year, 6-3 in conference play. They won the Pop-Tarts Bowl against North Carolina State. Head coach Chris Kleiman is back for a 6th season. Co-offense coordinator Matt Wells is in the first season, takes over for Colin Klein, who left to be the offense coordinator at Texas A&M. Matt was at OU as an offensive analyst for 2 years. Was Texas Tech's head coach prior to being the offense analyst at OU. And co-offense coordinator Connor Riley's first season has been on staff for several years as a line coach for the Wildcats. As far as offensive side of things, the QB last year starter Will Howard transferred to Ohio State. Avery Johnson looks to fill that position where he threw for 479 yards and 5 touchdowns last year. For the running back, G.J. Giddens is back, who rushed for 1,000. That was my mistake. I can't either. We'll just say roughly 1,200 rushing yards last year, because there's no way this guy rushed for 11,226 yards. That's my part for writing something down and then catch it earlier. But anyway, key factor there, because roughly over 1,200 rushing yards last year, 10 touchdowns as well. He had 323 receiving yards with 3 touchdowns. Dylan Edwards transferring in from Colorado. Like I said, big pickup. Like I said, who led the way at Colorado last year as their main running back. He had 321 rushing yards and 1 touchdown at Colorado last year. As for wide receiver, we'll need new playmakers to step up. Garrett Oakley is back to be the number 1 tight end. Jace Brown, who had 437 receiving yards for 3 touchdowns. Keegan Johnson, 227 receiving yards for 2 touchdowns. And Donta Cephas, transferring in from Penn State, was at Kent State prior to being at Penn State. Will be a good addition there for a wide receiver for the Wildcats. For defense, they were solid overall last year in defense. Brendan Mott will lead the way on the D-line. Austin Moore is their best linebacker on the team. Desmond Purnell and Austin Romaine will fill in on the outside linebackers spots. As for our secondary, Marquise Sigel and VJ Payne combined for 120 tackles. And their top cornerback, Jacob Parrish, is back, who led the team with 4 interceptions and 9 broken-up passes. The Wildcats open with UT Martin at home, on the road against Tulane, home against Arizona, at BYU, home for Oklahoma State, at Colorado, at West Virginia, home for Kansas, at U of H, home for Arizona State, home for Cincinnati, and finish on the road at Iowa State. The over-under projected for them this season is 8.5. I say the Wildcats go with finish with 8 wins on the season. From there, we're going to go to talk about Oklahoma State Cowboys. Went 10-4 last year, 7-2 in conference. They lost in the Big 12 championship game to Texas. They won the Texas Bowl against A&M, Texas A&M. They have head coach Mike Gundy coming back for his 20th season, because he's a man and you can go after him if you want, but apparently it's working out for him because he's back for his 20th season. Offensive coordinator Casey Dunn is back for his 5th season. Defense coordinator Brian Nardo for a 2nd season, and co-defense coordinator Joe Bob Clements is back for his 2nd season. On offense side of things, QB Alan Bowman. He was granted his 7th season, obviously with COVID and medical stuff. So I hope this guy has his doctor by now. With being in school for 7 years now, not 8 years, however long. But anyway, yeah. So like I said, he's granted his 7th season eligibility. He threw for 3,460 yards last year for 15 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. And he had 2 rushing touchdowns to go along with that. As far as running back, they're the top running back in the league last year, Mr. Ollie Gordon. Like I said, he won the Doak Walker winner, which is the best running back in the nation. He rushed for 1,732 yards, 21 touchdowns, and had 333 receiving yards and 1 touchdown. And as far as wide receiver, leading receiver, Brennan Presley will lead the way. He had 101 receptions for 991 yards, 6 touchdowns. Rashad Owens had 895 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. And Tyler Foster, transferring in from Ohio, will help there. As far as defense, D-line, we'll rely on a couple veterans, Colin Clay and Cody Waltersheed. Will be the main guys to look for on the D-line. As far as linebacker, they'll be lights out. Nick Martin had 140 tackles, 6 sacks, and 16 tackles for a loss. Colin Oliver, 73 tackles, 6 sacks, and 15.5 tackles for a loss, and 4 forced fumbles. And Justin Wright will contribute to the strong linebacker group of guys. As far as secondary, both Kendall Daniels and Trey Rucker combined for over 200 tackles last season are back at safety spot. Starting corner combination, Cam Smith and Corey Black return as well. As far as the schedule for the Cowboys, Oklahoma State, they open up with South Dakota State at home against Arkansas, on the road at Tulsa, at home for Utah, at K-State, home for West Virginia, at BYU, at Baylor, home for Arizona State, at TCU, home for Texas Tech, and finish at Colorado. They are projected over-under wins at 8.5. I'd say they hit the over with 9 wins on the season, maybe 10. Well, we shall see. As far as Next, we're going to discuss TCU. The Horned Frogs went 5-7 last year, 3-6 in conference play. Head coach Sonny Dykes is back for his third season, with offensive coordinator Kendall Briles for his second season, co-offensive coordinator A.J. Ricker for his third season. Defense coordinator Andy Avalos is in for his first season. He was Boise State's head coach from 2021 through 2023. Andy's replacing Joe Gillespie, who was dismissed. For our offense side of things, the QB Josh Hoover will get the nod as Chandler Morris transferred out to North Texas. Hoover threw for 2,206 yards for 15 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. Running back Cam Cook and Trey Sanders to lead the way in the backfield. For the wide receivers and tight end spot, Savon Williams and J.P. Richardson combining for over 1,000 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns are returning. Eric McAllister is transferring in from Boise State, will help the wide receiver group. And then picking up transfer tight end Drake Dabney from Baylor, who I mentioned earlier, who had 552 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns, will help out tremendously there. Like I said, on the defensive side, the D-line have 3 veterans returning, and transferring in from Notre Dame is Nana Usafo Mensah. Linebacker Caleb Elms-Orr transferring from Cal, and Devon Dale transferring in from Tulane will be key players at the linebacker spot, along with Namdi Abuyazor. As far as secondary, corner combo of Avery Elm and Travis Broughton transferring in from Utah will be solid, and the secondary will need some work as well, just in general throughout the season, to be solid there. As far as TCU's upcoming schedule, the Horned Frogs open on the road at Stanford, and then home for LIU, at home against Central Florida, at SMU, at Kansas, home for U of H, at Utah, at home for Texas Tech, at Baylor, home for Oklahoma State, at Arizona, and they finish on the road at Cincinnati. Their over-under is 6.5. I feel like the Horned Frogs will hit the under and finish with 6 wins on the season. With that, we'll go to Texas Tech Red Raiders, who went 7-6 overall, 5-4 in conference play, won the Independence Bowl. Head coach Joey McGuire is returning for his third season. Offense coordinator Zach Kittley is returning for his third season. Defense coordinator Tim Rudder is back for his third season as well. As far as offense side of things, QB Behirin Morton will lead the way. He threw for 1,754 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions with 4 rushing touchdowns. For his running backs wise, Taj Brooks is back after a monster 2023 season. He rushed for 1,541 yards, 10 touchdowns. As far as the wide receiver, position, 3 out of the 4 wide receivers are gone from last season for the Raiders. Koi Eakin is returning. He had 416 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. Transferring in is Josh Kelly from Washington State, and Caleb Douglas from Florida will be very helpful to help the wide receiver core out. Mason Tharp will be a solid tight end. He had 4 touchdowns in 2023 season, and Joe Conyers transferring in from Arizona State will contribute to the tight end mix for the Red Raiders. As far as defense side, the D-line key players are gone from last season. Should be enough depth to rotate everyone to stay fresh for the D-line for Texas Tech. As far as linebacker, Ben Roberts and Jacob Rodriguez lead the way, and they're a solid group of guys there. And secondary, safety CJ Baskerville and cornerback Braylon Lux will be contributing in the secondary. They'll look to the younger players to step up for the safety spots and elsewhere in the secondary. As far as Texas Tech's upcoming season schedule, they are opening up with ACU, which is Abilene Christian, at Washington State, home for North Texas, home for Arizona State, home for Cincinnati, at Arizona, home for Baylor, at TCU, at Iowa State, home for Colorado, at Oklahoma State, and finish at home with West Virginia. And the over-under projection on Texas Tech is 7.5. I'm going to go with the under and say they finish with 7 wins on the season. Next, we're going to go with the UCF, which is Central Florida Knights, who went 6-7 overall, 3-6 in conference in their first year in the Big 12. This is going to be their second season. They lost in the Gasparilla Bowl to Georgia Tech. Head coach, I guess, Malzahn is going to be his fourth season as a head coach there with office coordinator Tim Harris Jr. in the first season. Was at Central Florida for the 21-22 season, but he was an assistant coach last year at Miami. Co-offensive coordinator Darren Hensall will be back for his second season. Ted Roof is going to be in for his first season. He was Ted Roof is going to be defense coordinator Ted Roof for the first season. He was Oklahoma's defensive coordinator for the 22-23 season. And co-defense coordinator Addison Williams is back for his second season. With that, on the offense side of things, QB KJ Jefferson transferring in from Arkansas will be probably their starting quarterback. Dual threat style, a big, strong individual. He threw for 2,107 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions last year, while rushing for 447 yards and 2 touchdowns. Running back, lead rusher R.J. Harvey's back, who had 1,416 yards, 16 touchdowns, to go at 231 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Johnny Richardson and Penny Boone transferring in from Toledo will be helpful in the backfield. Wide receiver Kobe Hudson, who was second leading target last season, is back. 900 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. Xavier Townsend is returning, and transferring in from Auburn is Javarius Johnson. Will be key targets as well for KJ Jefferson and the UCF Knights on offense. And for defense side of things for UCF, defense lineman, Miami transfer Nigel Kelly will be contribute right away, and several veterans are back. That will be solid people there on the D-line. As far as linebacker, Josiah Pierre transferring in from Texas Tech, and Ethan Barr transferring in from Vandy will look to help out star player Deshaun Pace, who's will be all over the field on defense. As far as secondary, safety Damari Henderson was great last year, and cornerback Brandon Adams are back. New faces will help fill in the holes for the Knights on defense. As far as their schedule, the Knights open up with UNH, I believe that's University of New Hampshire. They're home against Sam Houston. At TCU, home for Colorado. At Florida, home for Cincinnati. At Iowa State, home for BYU. Home for Arizona. At Arizona State. At West Virginia, and finish at home against Utah. And their projected over-under is right at 7. I think they hit the over. At least we'll finish with 8, maybe 9 wins. But that's we'll see how that goes with them. We'll move to Utah. They'll, as the other team from the Pac-12, joining the Big 12 this year. Utah went 8-5 last year, 5-4 in the Pac-12, lost in the Las Vegas Bowl to Northwestern. Head coach Kyle Whittingham is leading the way for his 20th season as the head coach for the Utah Utes. Offensive coordinator Andy Ludwig is back for his 10th season as OC, and defense coordinator Morgan Scully is back for his 9th season as defense coordinator. As far as offensive side, Cam Rising, who should have probably a doctor degree by now, being his 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, whatever season. I mean, might as well just be an all-time student in college now. But he is back after missing all of the 23 season due to a knee injury. He has 46 touchdowns and 5,500 passing yards in the 2 prior seasons at Utah. Running back Micah Bernard is returning after missing most of the 23 season due to an injury, and Jalen Glover will be very beneficial to the backfield. As far as wide receiver, Money Parks and USC transfer Dorian Singer should do well with Rising slinging it, and tight end Cuthie is back after an injury. On the defense side, their top end is gone, but 3 other starters are back to make a very strong defensive line. Linebacker Kareen Reed and Lander Barton should lead the way in tackles. To help them is Sion Fotu. As for secondary, Zamaya Vaughn is back at the cornerback spot, and Keenan Johnson transferring in from Georgia Tech will help out the other cornerback spot. Alika Gilman from Stanford and Teo Johnson for the safety spots, and Nate Ritchie will be a key player too for the Utah Utes' upcoming schedule. They open with Southern Utah University at home. Then they're again at home against Baylor. Like I said earlier, that game against Baylor is a non-conference game. So, like I said, does not will not play a key factor in determining who goes to the Big 12 championship game if it comes down to a tiebreaker wise of head-to-head, because it does not count as a conference game. They're at Utah State, at Oklahoma State, home for Arizona, at Arizona State, home for TCU, at U of H, home for BYU, at Colorado, home for Iowa State, and finish on the road at Central Florida. And their over-under for this projection is 9.5 wins. I'm going to say they hit the over and win 10 games on this season. And to round out the Big 12, which should be now the Big 16, but, they'll leave it at that. But anyway, to round that out, West Virginia Mountaineers, who went 9-4 last year, 6-3 in conference play, won the Duke's Mayo Bowl against North Carolina. Head coach Neil Brown is back for his 6th season. Offensive coordinator Chad Scott for his 2nd season. Defense coordinator Jordan Leslie for his 5th season. And co-defense coordinator Shadon Brown is back for his 4th season. As far as offensive side of things, QB Garrett Green is returning. He threw for 2,406 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Rushed for 708 yards and 13 touchdowns. Running back Jaheim White, 842 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, and C.J. Donaldson is back as well, who rushed for 798 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns. So both are back for running back core of their group. It's going to be pretty solid. Wide receiver Jaden Bray, transferring in from Oklahoma State, will be a key target along with tight end Cole Taylor, who had 444 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns, and Hudson Clement, who had 480 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. On the defense side, defensive line, they led the Big 12 in sacks. A solid group of players will be contributing all the way around. Look for Sean Martin to lead the way. Linebacker Ben Cutter will be a key player for the group. A couple of transfers in will help out in the linebacker core. And the secondary safety combination of Aubrey Burks and Anthony Wilson will be good as any of the Big 12 schools. transfer corners, TJ Crandall from Colorado State and Aiden Garnson from Duquesne will fill in the gaps there. As far as West Virginia's schedule, they open with Penn State at home, home against University of Albany, at Pitt, home for Kansas, at Oklahoma State, home for Iowa State, home for Kansas State, at Arizona, at Cincinnati, home for Baylor, at Central Florida, and they finish on the road at Texas Tech. Their projected over/under is 6.5. I initially thought they'd probably finish with 6. I think they'll probably 7. So we'll see how that pans out for the Mountaineers. So that is the upcoming preview and breakdown for the Big 12 for the 2024 season. Like I said, they don't have a North or South or East or West division. They just have the set schedule, and whoever has the best conference record overall will play in the conference championship game at Jerry World. And I'm projecting, I think it'll be more likely. I mean, I know a lot can happen, and teams may play better than what people may initially think how they will do. But right now, if I had to look at things on paper, I would say Oklahoma State and Utah will be playing each other in the Big 12 championship game, and I think Utah wins, and they will punch their ticket to the new expanded college playoff for the national championship. So, like I said, that rounds it out. We'll see how things go as the season gets underway here in a couple days. So let's see how everyone does. And like I said, I wish all the schools best of luck. And there. So with that, I will do well, for me, it's EMO Cats, but in this case, for my wife and her family, Sic 'em Bears. Until next time, I will, so until next time, we will do this again very soon. Real quick, before I actually sign off, send any questions, or whatever, feel free, I'll touch base. Like I said, I'll try to email back or talk about it. Like I said, feel free to email me at the glass, ATTHE glass podcast at gmail.com. So at the glass podcast at gmail.com. Like I said earlier on my Conference USA, if you're on Twitch, follow my good buddy Christian. They're at Choppa Style Plays, I believe is his Twitch. I don't have it in front of me, but shout out to him if you are on Twitch and want to watch him play Pokemon and Elden Ring and all that other stuff. Anyway, like I said, signing off, Sic 'em Bears. Best of luck to them in this upcoming season. And again, at the glass podcast at gmail.com if you want to shoot me anything. Till then, take care. Later.